Good evening, film fans. I feel like Christopher Nolan's name is never off of the list of potential future Bond directors, and sure enough, his Dark Knight trilogy certainly influenced the Daniel Craig era of the Bond series, but if there's one film in his resume that I think solidified his position on that potential future Bond director list, it's Inception. Cast your minds back to 2010, if you will, a time when multiplexes were awash with posters for the next Harry Potter, Twilight, and Transformers sequels. There was an abundance of animated family films out, and Iron Man 2 had just come out, and no one seemed to like it very much, so good luck building to that big Avengers crossover thing you're planning, guys. Let me know how that works out for you. But one of the most hotly anticipated movies of the year was an original concept from Christopher Nolan called Inception. I have very strong memories of anticipation for this film. I remember reviewers at the time lauding it for being an action thriller spectacle with a brain, and certainly when I look back at a lot of the movies I saw around that same time, it does stand out as something quite unique. Does it still hold up though? Well, let's get into it. Leonardo Dicaprio is Cobb, quite why his parents named him after a bread roll I'll never know, but anyway, he's an extractor, someone who, through the help of science fiction technology...
We're not science fiction, we're in fact science fact.
Okay, science fact technology is able to infiltrate people's subconsciousness. He and his collaborators, including Arthur, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, are guns for hire. If you're rich and you want to get inside someone's head to extract some information, these are the guys who can do just that, through a shared dream world with settings deliberately designed to aid their missions. They are hired by Mr. Saito, played by Ken Watanabe, to perform Inception, which is to implant an idea in someone else's head, basically make them think that they came up with an idea themselves. In this instance, Saito wants Cobb to implant an idea in the head of Robert Fisher, played by Cillian Murphy, to dissolve his father's company. In exchange, Cobb's criminal record would be wiped clean and he'd be able to visit America again, where his kids reside. That's the setup, and much of the first hour of the film is seeing Cobb recruit his team. It's a very heist movie in that regard. It just so happens that instead of breaking into a vault in Las Vegas, this team are going to break into a Peaky Blinders head. Cobb recruits Elliot Page's Ariadna as an architect to construct the various landscapes the characters enter. Ariadna is very much the audience surrogate for a whole heaping of exposition about how this all works, where the technology comes from, the various rules at play, and it's a lot to take in, but the setup is so engaging and spun out in such a way that it doesn't feel like you're being lectured to, but most importantly, it's all really understandable, and despite there being a lot of highfalutin talk, I never don't understand what's happening in any moment, which is quite an achievement, I think. This is in stark contrast with how I experienced Interstellar and Tenet, which was basically me making mental tabs of Wikipedia articles to look up once I was out of the movie theater. What the hell does general relativity mean? Wait, why did that guy age and they all stayed the same? Did he say time dilation? I thought that it was something to do with gravity? Something. Okay, you're overthinking this. Just stop thinking and take it in. Wait, what's a wormhole? I don't have any of that with Inception. It's all just a big dream heist. It's gettable. I can roll with it, and even though in retrospect I might have some questions, or maybe there are a couple of things that I didn't quite get on a first viewing, but certainly on repeated viewings, and even that first time watching it, I could just roll with it. It's all good. So that's the main plot, but the main emotional thrust of the film is Cobb's relationship with his wife, or rather his own subconscious projection of his wife, Moll, played by Marion Cotillard. We get flashbacks and backstory about the couple's relationship throughout the film, and Moll is such a great agent of chaos throughout the film, and also gives the film some emotional weight, along with the fact that the whole reason that Cobb embarks on this scheme in the first place is to see his kids again. I don't think of Christopher Nolan as being a particularly emotional director. I always feel like there's a certain detached coldness to his films, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think the same of a lot of Stanley Kubrick films. But in Inception, I feel like the relationship between Dicaprio and Cotillard's characters are kind of perfectly judged, and it's just the right level of emotional investment I need in a narrative. The second half of the film is largely spent in the various levels of the dreams, as the characters go about trying to plant the idea inside Cillian Murphy's head. I love this band of characters, by the way. Tom Hardy is here too as Eames, who is an impersonator, and he's playing it a little bit camp, and his wardrobe kind of reflects this. He does everything with a cheeky grin. He's definitely one of the most fun characters in the gang and a real standout character. The dreams comprise of a variety of action and suspense set pieces, funnily enough. Almost immediately spanners are thrown into the works as the gang go from one dream to the next, deeper into the subconscious. There are really nice and clever real-world stakes at play too, so failing just isn't an option for this group, and there's no, putting a pin staying in it and coming back to it when a better opportunity comes along. Now, one of my big things leading up to this film's release was wondering how the dreams were going to be presented. Like, I'd seen plenty of trailers and behind-the-scenes stuff, and sure, streets turn up at 90-degree angles and a train goes through a busy street, but dreams are so unstructured, or can be so unstructured and non-linear. I was very curious to see how that was going to be translated into this film. I don't know about you, but when I dream, things can get pretty random and fantastical. There can be dinosaurs, there can be zombies, there can be zombie dinosaurs. There can be that dark, empty, hollow void that you fall into and it feels like you're falling through it for hours and hours upon end, and eventually when you hit the bottom, all that is there in the pit with you is your deepest, darkest fear. And there can be hobbits. There's none of that in Inception, and that's not to its detriment. There are still fantastical things like characters can conjure objects out of nowhere and such, but funnily enough, I never really feel like I'm watching a visual representation of a dream with this film. It's all too linear to feel dreamlike, and I guess a part of that is down to the plot, of course. I mean, these dreams are constructed and influenced by the characters to achieve a certain goal. I just find it ironic that a film about dreams set within dreams ends up feeling so, well, plain, I guess is the word, and I'm comparing this to films like Vertigo, Carnival of Souls, Suspiria, all films that I would certainly cite as having very dreamlike atmospheres, even when they are, perhaps arguably, set in a version of reality for the most part. And just while we're on the subject, the best representation of a dream on screen I've ever seen is in an episode of The Sopranos, where you see Tony Soprano's dream, and everything about that episode is just pitch perfect. The lack of linearity, the seemingly nonsensical elements, it feels like a true visual representation of a subconscious in a way that Inception never does for me. As I say, not a problem for me when I'm watching the film because it uses its surrealist setting in other ways, fitting for an action film. One of the most memorable moments being a fight sequence in which Joseph Gordon-Levitt is battling a goon and the entire landscape is tilting, and seeing the behind-the-scenes stuff about how they accomplished this is just incredible. I'd extend that same sentiment to much of the action as well. They have Bond alumni Chris Corbould on board as special effects supervisor, and him and his team won Oscars for their work on this film, which is incredibly well deserved. So much of the action is achieved using practical methods. They'd literally have entire sets on scales so that they could tilt them any which way they wanted. It's still some of the most exciting action I've ever seen in a film, and it looks beautiful. The film picked up another Oscar for its cinematography. It of course has a truly magnificent Hans Zimmer score, and Michael Caine pops up in a small but memorable role. I mean, what more could one want from a Chris Nolan joint? Now, when it comes to Nolan and Bond, this, along with Tenet and his Batman series, are the ones that I see bandied about the most as examples of how and why he should be allowed to helm a 007 adventure, and sure enough, the climax of Inception really does evoke a lot of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Aside from the action in the climax and some of the stunts throughout, though, I don't think of this film as having a particularly Bondian feel to it. The mission isn't like anything that Bond would ever go on, and I don't feel like Leonardo DiCaprio is a very Bond-like lead, unlike something like Tenet, where I feel like, oh, okay, this is obviously very sci-fi and fantastical as far as Bond goes, but there is something slightly more Bondian about that. I can't say I'd be much fussed either way whether Nolan was announced as a Bond director or not. I don't think I've ever outright disliked any of his films, and he certainly isn't afraid to think big when it comes to action, but I find that his films kind of lack a bit of the humour that I think is an inherent part of every Bond film, even in the more serious ones. But hey, he's a A-list director and a legendary talent, so it'd be hard to turn your nose up completely at the idea of him directing a Bond. On the back of Inception just being a smart, tightly plotted, super satisfying and inventive action thriller, I could see why people would want a Nolan Bond on the back of this film alone. I'll say here it's my absolute favourite of his work so far. I remember adoring it when it first came out in 2010. I saw it at the cinema multiple times and I return to it every few years at home. It gets better and better for me, in all honesty, and I can't recommend it enough if you just like original standalone action thrillers with a bit more of a brain and a heart than you might be used to. Thanks for watching this video, and I certainly hope to get to some more Christopher Nolan films in the future. I think he's a really interesting choice for potentially directing some future Bond film, and who knows, maybe one day we will actually get that. But in the meantime, please do let me know your thoughts on Inception in the comments section below. Also below, you can click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and the Mrs. Bell notification button, which will give you up-to-date updates on whenever I upload future content on this channel. Also below, links to my various social media pages, including my Facebook page, my Twitter page, my Instagram page, and my Patreon page, for those of you who want to go one extra step in supporting this channel, so please do head over to that site for more details there. And with all that being said, and until next time, film fans, so long for now.